For those of you who have not had a chance to meet me, my name is Taylor. I'm the Interim Executive Director. We're going to be talking about a not so popular topic today, but a necessary one at that, which is the 2023 proposed rate increases, as well as a little bit of a walk through the budgeting process, what you can expect for next year, and a little bit of what went into some of the thoughts and some of the factors that have really driven. So we'll be talking about the 2023 rate increases, as well as some of the factors that are driving those increases, some of the factors that went into the budgeting process for 2023. So I'll be kind of covering a little bit about economic factors inside the community, outside the community, what our thought process was as an organization, as well as some of the internal costs that we've seen increase, as well as how some of that is going to affect you as residents. So I'll go nice and slow, but there is a little bit of, there's probably about 25 or 30 slides that we're going to get through, so I will try to make this as quick and painless as possible. And then at the end, we will have some Q&A sessions. I know you guys are going to have lots of questions. If there are questions you have that I'm not able to answer for you right off the bat today, I will note them down, and then I will make sure that I follow up with you. And I know we're going to have a chance to sit down with Basil and the Finance Committee after this a little bit too, to dig in a little bit deeper and try to get some more information that may be questions coming from you all as residents. So without further ado, I'm going to present to you the proposed rate increases for 2023. We're going to walk through the main components of the budget for 23, and then we're also going to spend some time on the key factors that go into determining the proposed budget and the proposed increases. So when Jesse and Nikki and Mike were here, we heard a little bit about some of the focuses for not only Village on the Green, but also LifeSpace as a whole. One of our main focuses coming into 2023 is really to drive independent living occupancy. So when it comes to the financial health of not only Village on the Green, but also LifeSpace as a whole, occupancy and revenue driving is really the main focus, and really the only way that we can stabilize some of these costs from an overall standpoint. We want to steward the business and reduced expenses. So there's a few ways we've done that. I'll get into a couple of details here. We also want to make sure we're delivering an exceptional culinary experience to you. I know that that has not been the case ongoing for a little while. I assure you that there are plans in place. As we start to see some of the new culinary programming come through, you will see continual improvement in that. I will talk a little bit about how that culinary program planning also fits into the budget and some of the expense. And we also want to make sure that we're delivering high quality care and services. And I think particularly in this community, you can see that through the higher levels of living. We have a 5-star health center, as well as the longest running Governor's Gold Seal Health Center in all of Florida, as well as the brand new higher level of living building that is in the Oaks over there that was constructed for you. I know that some of our communities are still working on outdated higher level of living as far as the actual health centers themselves. So we should feel blessed that we have a brand new building over there with such a beautiful assisted living, memory care, and health center. I know that everyone's not necessarily using that right away, but to have those kind of facilities at your disposal really is a blessing. Some other focus areas for 2023, we're going to be introducing new technology to enable the business and resident experience. We're talking a little bit about how some of that technology can increase communication between you as residents and us. We also have the continued focus on talent acquisition, increasing team member engagement, retention, and capacity. So we're doing that through our team member surveys as well. They're very similar to the resident surveys that you all participate in. Labor cost is obviously our highest out of any of the costs that we incur here in the community, as well as LifeSpace as an enterprise. So making sure that we have team members who are engaged, who are providing the services of the highest quality possible to you. But really making sure that those folks that are here and servicing you, as far as wage increases, we're going to make sure that we are recruiting top talent that really match what we're doing as far as wages that are being paid out, to make sure that you are all getting served by top quality talent. Business analytics to enable decision making. This is really more of a home office function. We have several new financial systems, as well as the new HCRM that's coming out. That's going to help us significantly with operations as far as team member management. It's also a significant cost reduction. Customer insights to enhance and deliver the curated experience. And a part of this is also the resident survey that you all participate in. more feedback we get from you, the more that you get a chance to talk to me or the executive director who's in my spot, the more that we can really kind of customize and try to continue to make sure that the services you are all getting as residents are what you really want and what you really need. So let's talk a little bit about the budget planning process. So as an organization, our budget process goes from July to September. We have capital review meetings in the beginning. We then move into occupancy and occupancy expectations. We then look at the external pricing analysis. That's really through our vendors and what we expect as far as capital expenses. We have a wage and benefit analysis process that's also undertaken. And then we have other expenses. And then when we sit together, we kind of bring everything all together. In October, we have the board approval for the monthly increase. That was the meeting that Steve and I went to. And we had a chance to sit in front of the board. We proposed, LifeSpace proposed what they wanted for the 2023 increase. We had the opportunity to kind of speak up on behalf of the residents. I know Steve did a very good job of, voicing some concerns, discussing the previous increases that you all had. In November, the budget is finalized, and in December, there is the final board approval. So this is obviously the proposed increases, and I can tell you a little bit more as we get to the end as far as what that number looks like, and then what they're capping that at, and what we can expect moving forward. So we're going to go through some of the drivers that really impact the resident rate increase directly. When we look at the key factors that go into the increased expense over time for Village on the Green as a community, as well as LifeSpace as an enterprise, those are the factors that also increase our decision to raise the resident rates. These are market wage pressures, the cascading impact of inflation. As we know, inflation is continually an issue right now and doesn't seem to be stopping anytime soon. Cost reduction initiatives and efforts, that's something that we do internally. Projected occupancy by levels of living, which again, from a revenue standpoint, is a huge factor in what we can expect for cost. Third-party rate increase in payer mix, and enterprise-wide capital needs. So those 5 areas really are the main ones that go into our budgeting considerations, as well as the considerations when they decide what the true rate increase percentage is going to be. The first of which being inflation. So currently we are seeing the highest inflation in 40 years that we've seen since 1981. Just recently we had a 40-year high of 9.1, which was the June high, and is at an 8.3 through August 2022. When it comes to food costs, food is up 11.4%, and energy is 23.8%, outpacing overall inflation for August year over year. A combination of inflation and a high competitive labor market continues to drive wages up, and I know that you have all seen the impact of that with the agency challenge that we had earlier in the year, and the need to increase our wages that we were paying our team members in order to actually retain talent, keep our own team members in-house, which is very important. So when it comes to labor in the community, not having our own team members, particularly in the frontline staff when it comes to the higher levels of living and the clinical staff, we find that if we're using agency or if we're using outside staff, you're not getting the quality of care that you're expecting, and you're also not getting engaged team members who are truly here for your benefit. So when we talked about wage increases and being able to retain our team members, that's something that all organizations across our industry have done, and it has unfortunately been necessary to do that to retain our own team members. Home prices continue to increase, but are moderate in 2023. So through July of 2022, home prices went up 15.8%. I know that doesn't necessarily impact you all directly as residents. It does directly impact the need for the wage increases for our team members, because these are things that our team members are experiencing in the community. Florida leads year over year at 29.6%. So I don't know if any of you have watched home values in Florida increase over the past year or two. I know that that's something that's been a significant increase. Chicago year over year is 10%. So home prices forecasted to increase in 2023, but moderate on a year over year basis by 3.8%. The average 30 years fixed mortgage interest rate is 7.5%, which is significantly up from where it was last year. And you can see that the housing market continues to be a challenge. So this is a slide about compensation increases. So compensation cost increases 5.5% year over year through June of 2022. I won't spend a whole lot of time on this slide. This is really just for a visual comparison of where compensations have been through, and the increase between 2019 and 2022 you can see is really fairly significant. The highest at the top there, leisure and hospitality, as far as the 12-month percent changes in wages and salaries. So in our industry in particular, we have seen some of the highest wage growth out of pretty much anywhere. So considering these are certainly unprecedented times when it comes to wage increase pressures, there's a few things that we've done as an organization to try to mitigate that as much as possible, as well as to make sure that with those increased costs, you're actually getting the best talent that we can possibly recruit and provide for you. So the wage rate, as I was talking about, was the primary issue related to recruiting and retaining team members last year. The labor shortage drove use of agency in 2021. Our agency spend in Village on the Green was at LifeSpace was $5.4 million, and $5.8 million in August of 2022. So despite talks of the recession, the unemployment still remains low, and wages are forecasted externally to be between 4 and 5%. So we can see the mid-year wage increase enabled us to keep pace, but inflation growth at 8.3 and wage growth at 5.5 are predicted to continue to grow. Enterprise-wide, our investment was $17 million as of January 2022. I think that's an important factor to just kind of note, is how much actual investment went into making sure that we're retaining our own team members. So why is it important for us to invest in our team members? Our partnership to invest in the team members is paying off, because when we invest in our team members, we're able to reduce openings, improve engagement, reduce turnover, and increase retention. So turnover is an expensive thing to endure as a company, and retaining our team members who are committed to quality of life for you as well as quality of services is an important factor. When we have engaged team members, this really impacts you as the resident and your experience that you have in the community. And Village on the Green has seen significant reduction in the use of agency over the past year and continues to hire and retain new team members as a result of our increased wages that we're paying. As I mentioned, there's some other areas where we're seeing inflationary pressures, so we'll talk a little bit about that. So if we look at benefits, we've seen a 9% increase, property taxes at 5% increase, utilities at 11%. Insurance, from a property insurance 20%, liability insurance 10%. For culinary, there's a 7.2% increase overall. It's important to note though, for the culinary experience, when we talk about the increases, so the 3.5 is the fixed percent, is fixed as far as the increase for Unidyne as an organization. The food costs that we have increased as far as the budget is at 11.5%. That is directly related to what we started to talk about, the culinary programming changes, where we will have a higher budget for actual procurement of quality foods that we are, so when we talk about meats, produce, being able to find vendors that are local and locally source better quality product for you, that is where the funding is going to be going. So when we talk about an increase in culinary expenses, it is not going to Unidyne as an organization or their operations, it is going to the actual procurement of quality products for you all to eat. Some of the expense mitigating efforts that we want to talk about a little bit. So the implementation of Workday, this is the HCRM program, the Human Resources program that is coming in. So there is significant savings in software. I want to say it's about a 35% savings compared to our previous human resource program. So where we went from having 17 different programs that all supported our human resources department, and we're going to one. And Workday is going to improve our labor management, improve our team member experience, and really give the ability for us to have better control over our hiring process, onboarding process, training process, and continue to make sure that we are delivering top quality team members who know their roles, who are well versed in what they're doing, and who can deliver a good experience for all of you. Implementation of procurement systems. So we have a new program called Coupa that is a very similar type of situation where we've taken several programs and really derived them down into one. This is really for improved spend management, improved contract management, which helps folks like me make sure that when I come in and step into a new community, that I'm able to really identify the contracts that we have in place, easily find the information that I need to do, and then also be able to operate efficiently. Some of the other stuff also review all of our staffing standards and customize to each community. That's really part of Workday. So being able to manage our labor costs, particularly in the higher levels of living when we have scheduling and staffing. So instead of using multiple programs, again, we're all bringing this into one program that really allows us to really manage those labor costs by ensuring that we have the right people in the right places for the right amount of time. Helps us to manage our overtime costs, help us to manage the overall labor costs as well. This is also contributes to utility contracting, proactively securing multi-year contracts. So that's something that's done out of the home office and the regional level. But I know that with increased energy costs, that's something that we're looking at right now is to contract out into the future and to lock in energy rates for the communities as a whole in Florida. As well as some other community cost reductions, which is really around agency and staffing. So the more we are able to retain our own team members, the more that agency cost goes down. And I have a slide that I'll discuss in a little bit about where that cost of agency was and where it is now and the significant improvement that's been happening. So this slide represents the agency cost and usage at Village on the Green. And I know that I wasn't here for some of this, but I can tell you that even at the community that I was at in South Florida, we saw a very similar experience at the height of COVID. There was an exodus of frontline staff, there was an exodus of different department staff out of this industry and just out of industries in general. People decided that they wanted to take a break from working. This created a situation where, particularly in the higher levels of living, as well as the culinary department and some of the other departments that service you directly, we ended up having to utilize agency staff. Now, when we're utilizing agency staff, the hourly rates that we're paying these agencies to produce contract staff is significantly higher than what we pay, even at the increased wage rates that we're hiring our team members at now. So at the height in February, March, we were spending about $185,000 monthly on agency staff, which is now down to about $4,000. And you can attribute that to some of the hard work that our HR department's done, as well as the staffing and scheduling folks that are over in the higher levels of living, because at the end of the day, the higher levels of living and some of the frontline clinical staff were the hardest ones to really get back in and to really rehire and to get re-engaged into the industry. So this is a good visual as far as some of the progress that's been made and some of the progress that we expect to continue to see. We'll talk a little bit about what went into building the 2023 annual budget. So when we talk about revenue and sources of funds, we have obviously the residents' monthly service fees. We have revenue from Medicare and other third-party reimbursements. So this is for those folks that come for short rehab stays in the health center, as well as some of the folks that are in the other higher levels of living who come for short stays. We have entrance fees, we have financing, investment income, and then we have our expenses, which is the use of funds, which is obviously operating expenses, entrance fee refunds for those folks that either choose to move away or those folks that pass away, debt payments, capital expenditures, and then obviously our net operating margin, which is one of the factors that Jesse had discussed when he was here visiting, is the difference between our operating revenues and our operating expenses, and really is our benchmark bottom line as far as the financial health of the community itself and the organization as a whole. After the use of all funds, it's really crucial for our future that there be funds left over to set aside for a rainy day and to strengthen the balance sheet. So again, when we looked at the slides that Jesse and crew was presenting when they were here, we can see that Village on the Green from an operating standpoint is still a little bit in the red and still being supported by some of our other sister communities as a whole, as an enterprise as a whole that are producing, top quality or have a little bit better of the occupancy. So at the 72% that we're at now, or 74% that we're at now, that's where we're really falling short, is on the revenue side and the occupancy side. So we're trying to mitigate that as much as possible through reducing expenses. And we'll talk a little bit about occupancy and sales right now. So 2023 budget for independent living revenue, closings, and attrition. So the expected move-ins over the course of the year of 2023, we expect 44 total move-ins in the year of 2023. We expect 32 total move-outs in 2023, growing with the expected growth in occupancy from 74.8% to 80.2%. Now, this is our forecast. Obviously, that's, we can't predict the future perfectly, but I think that we've been pretty close in the past as far as these estimates and the sales forecasts. We have a great sales team here, and I do expect to see that we do hit our actual move-in goals. We're on target to hit our budget for move-in goals this year, closing out a strong fourth quarter, and trying to see how we're going to move into 2023 with some creativity and some new programming. I think we're going to be at least meet or exceed the expectations in 2023. So when we convert those move-ins into expected net entrance fees, so remember these are in thousands, so our expected net entrance fees received is going to be $16,813,000. Entrance fee refunds expected about almost $5 million, with a total net entrance fee of just short of $12 million, and that's the expectation for 2023. And this is based on our sales forecast and the expected move-ins. When we talk about the higher levels of living, which is the Oaks, assisted living, memory care, and skilled nursing, remember that they function as a very significant revenue driver for the community as a whole, particularly the health center and its short-term rehab program. When we talk about Medicare reimbursement rates, it's a significant revenue driver. So when we talk about higher level of living occupancy compared to the enterprise, our Oaks is doing a fantastic job. So for the health center to be at 91.5%, assisted living at 91.7%, and memory care at 88.9%, and this is actually a little bit lower than it is today. So some of those fluctuate significantly on a day-to-day basis, particularly the health center with short-term rehab, because some of those stays are within the 18 to 20-day range. But it is important to know that the higher level of living occupancy remains higher than the LifeSpace average, and it is a great revenue source that helps mitigate any kind of shortfalls in independent living occupancy as well as independent living revenues. The home office allocation, I know that this is something that was brought up when Jesse and everyone was here. I know that this is always a concern as far as what portion of our expenses are attributed to the home office and what that allocation looks like and whether that's truly justified. So I wanted to take a minute just to kind of touch on this as far as the home office continues to reduce their overall budget as a percent of revenue, and has since 2019, where we were looking at somewhere around 8.7, it looks like, down to the just over 7.8% that we're looking at on 2023. So the home office is partnering with the communities to try to mitigate their expenses as well as ours. And the percent of revenue to the home office budget allocation is reduced from last year into this year and is expected to continue to reduce. Part of that is through adding new communities, and part of that is through their reduction in expenses as well. In reality, we can talk about the functions that home office actually provides us as a community, and it's important to note that from a cost standpoint, if I was to try to take these functions in-house and do everything that they do for us in here, things like strategic planning, foundation support, culinary programming, a lot of the clinical support, particularly the accounting and finance department, it would be very, very expensive and very difficult for me to bring in-house. Third-party billing as far as the higher levels of living in the short-term Medicare stays, business analytics, capital planning, there's the human resources department. I'm not going to get into all of these individually, but this is just kind of an outline of all of the different departments and different functions that the home office does provide for us as far as support, operational support, and financial support. And if we were to try to do that all ourselves, it would be significantly more costly than the allocation that we do provide to them. Being able to leverage and scale these across the communities really does come at a fraction of the cost. That's really kind of the point of that slide. So positions and services to hire or retain if not part of the LifeSpace family. So again, this is just another outline of who I would have to hire and retain internally here if it wasn't part of the home office allocation. So I won't spend a whole lot of time in this, but you can see these different services. So when we look at the LifeSpace home office compared to the industry, we come in at just barely over the median as the industry, 12% being the max in the industry, 4% being the min, but still providing all of the actual services that a lot of the other home offices do not. So that's really the point of that slide, is just to really say that we are hitting all of those departments, all of those services, and doing it at just over the median cost of the industry. So, just to kind of recap, the summary of the key factors, we're looking at 8.3% inflation through August of 2022, wage growth at 5.5%, expected to increase to 9%, persistent labor shortages, which has caused us to, the need to increase the actual wage rates that we're providing for our team members, wage growth that's not keeping pace with inflation, and then obviously internal factors, retaining talent, projected occupancy, rate increase in payer mix, capital needs enterprise-wide, and then reinvestment in team members, culinary programming, and some of the other important factors that you have. That all being said, our unprecedented inflation persists and is anticipated to continue to grow into 2023. Our costs have significantly increased over that mark of 7.9%. That monthly fee increase of 7.9% is what was proposed to the board. The board did approve a cap of 7.9%. So 7.9% is enterprise-wide across LifeSpace. There is not a community that's going to experience more than a 7.9% increase. I do believe we can expect to see somewhere right around that 7.9% increase. I don't expect to see anything lower than that, although that final determination has yet to be made by the board. You can expect to see the final rate increase letter coming from my desk by Monday. So I think they're finalizing it today and tomorrow, and I should have that, and it should be mailed out on Monday when I come back to the community. And we'll talk a little bit about just the overall. The last slide that I have is really just for your own peace of mind, or lack thereof. So when we talk about cost increases that Village on the Green is truly experiencing, we're close to 16% as far as our actual costs, increase for the year of 2023. And passing on 7.9 of that to you as far as the wage increase means that we're trying to take on as much of that as we can operationally, internally, through cost reduction and other programs. And that really is the last slide that I have. Does anybody want to see any of those other slides again, or does anybody have any questions that I could try to answer for you right off the bat? Yes, Basil.
Yeah, Taylor, I do have a question, because
Sure.
I think there's been a change this year that we haven't had in the past.
What change is that?
The change that the board now has not approved the budget at this point in the year. I've always understood the budget was approved in October, but you're saying that it will not be approved until December.
So,
is that correct?
So that's the way that I understand it right now is yes. So they have met and they've approved, they've had the initial approval as far as what they're proposing, and that's what this is. And yes, they're still meeting currently to have that final approval. And I think when the increase letters come out, that's the final decision as far as the increase. I think what they're still working on is the final budget approval. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think that is a change just for the residents here.
And I can find out, because I did not know that. So I'm happy to look into that if you'd like.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
Yes,
I
sir.
think it
That's
is a
no
difference
problem.
there.
Sure. Steve.
I'm surprised that you don't have any more questions. I just want to compliment that gentleman up there. He did a hell of a job.
Thank you.
Of presenting the data. I've seen many of those charts, not the majority, but many of those charts before while I was in Dallas, and I was pretty damn frustrated with some of the data.
Mm-hmm.
And I did make a presentation back to them as well as to the board, because I thought 7.9% added to the 6% in January of this year and a 6.3% in August of this year was a little bit out of, sort of expensive. Over 20% in 1 year is pretty damn high. So if no one has any question, I could sort of go through each of the charts and ask about 10 questions with each of the charts.
And I'm happy to do.
But I got a solution. I went to Publix this morning. They are hiring any age people to, in the front end, to be bad boys or bad girls, as well as anybody who wants to work. In my case, the escalation will be somewhere around $500 a month. So they pay $11 an hour. Can you imagine that? $11 an hour to be a bad boy? So you only have to work 10 or 11 hours every week, and you can pay the increase. So, and maybe our interim executive director will let us take the bus over, and then we can come out of that, and and then pick us up later in the day after we work 4 or 5 hours. I guess if the slant and all picked that up, or the TV stations, that probably wouldn't look too good. But seriously, it's a shame that we have to take another huge increase, in my opinion. It's a lot of transparency that we didn't have in the past, we currently have. But I still want to see an organization chart from our illustrious home offices, too, as well as what the home offices have done to reduce their expenses. And Jesse promised us in the corporate meeting that he would make sure that was done. And I'm looking forward to seeing it. But as far as cost here, the more we drain here, the worse it's going to be, as far as I'm concerned. There are things that we can improve, but there is very little, in my opinion, that you can currently take out without, penny ante things. And if people do have suggestions of how to increase the people's discipline or whatever is necessary to reduce costs, I think Taylor would accept any recommendations or
Yes, sir.
solutions.
And you make some very valid points, Steve. The significance of expenses is there. When you look at last year's two increases annualized, it's actually closer to like 8.9% when you look at it.
Don't give me numbers.
And I'm
Please
not,
don't.
again, it's not about argument. I'm just saying, so when we're talking about increases, this increase is a little bit less than we experienced last year. The hope is that through continued increase in occupancy, continued cost reduction, we can try to mitigate some of the external factors, and hopefully when we come to 2024, we see something that's even lower.
But like I said yesterday, or whenever Jesse was here,
Certainly.
the issue is stop cookie cutting this everyone.
Sure.
That's crazy. I mean, putting a 7.9% cap in Orlando or Longwood compared to putting it in Chicago makes no sense.
I understand where you're coming from.
Okay, it really doesn't. When you're paying the hourly wages that they're paying in Chicago and the hourly wages that our competitor is paying. When I asked Jesse about that, he said, we hired an organization that did a competitive analysis. I said, in Longwood, in Orlando? Well, he wasn't sure. Well, come on.
Well, and I can't speak to what they did as far as their, where their competitive analysis came from, but at the same time, the only thing I can speak to from my own personal experience is running the health center down in South Florida and trying to recruit the staff that I needed to keep that building running. We were significantly under the necessary wage to recruit those nurses and aides. So
you got a hell of a different environment.
Sure. And again, being new to Longwood in this particular market, I would expect you to have a little better understanding than I do, but I do understand what you're saying. Yes, ma'am.
Taylor, you said the 7.9% is for all the communities. Right?
Correct. Yes, the board decided that they were going to set the cap for all of life space communities at 7.9% as far as the increase goes.
That's different from,
That's different from what's been had in the past, yes, absolutely. And I think even previously in this community, you actually had different increases for different, different model homes and that kind of stuff, weren't it, right? No? Is that not correct? Okay, so I understood it as some of the newer villas didn't have an increase and some of the older ones did, or I don't know how long ago that was, but yes, no, but this is very much, across the enterprise that is capped at 7.9%. Yes, that is what the board decided on.
And it's a chicken way of doing it. It really is.
oh, it is?
Yeah, oh yeah, because if you did it by individual community, it would take a lot more work and effort to do it right. This way they do it across the board, and it's much easier.
Okay.
You say cap,
Makes you feel better.
Yeah.
so there's gotta be something less than.
That I can't speak to, I'm not really sure. I just know that is, the information that was given to me is that the rate increases enterprise-wide were capped at 7.9%.
Cap is a, yeah.
Capped is yes it
Is
is,
an
and that is the
open-ended
language
term.
that was passed to me as well. And I can find out whether there are other communities that are experiencing less, I don't think so.
While we're on that subject,
Sure.
The question was asked at the board meeting, is whether or not there will be a second increase.
Correct.
And what was the answer?
The answer was that this increase was designed so that hopefully we do not have a second increase.
Hopefully.
Yes. I cannot guarantee that, yes, particularly from my desk, yes. Now, what I can tell you is that when we went through the budgeting exercise, we left some room in there for continued expense increase without any increase in your monthly service fees, which is why we capped it at that number and which is why, that is an enterprise-wide scenario. So go ahead, Basil.
I want to stay on the inflation issue for a
Yes.
while. Because all of a sudden, I keep pretty good records of the increases in the past.
Sure.
And the 651 does have some suggested guidelines.
Of course.
They're not enforceable, but they are suggested. And our comparison over time meant that the life space increase over the years, the 3.5 or the 4 or whatever we got, were just about double the CPI for a protracted period of time.
Okay.
And we compared that against the increases in Social Security and military and federal retirement
Right.
funds, things of that nature. And they were right ahead. Now we've shifted gears, in my opinion, and we're actually hanging pretty close to the actual CPI rates.
Correct.
And so I think it behooves residents to be alert on that, so when it returns, which it will eventually, drop back down, I'd like to see us have a greater adherence to the CPI.
Okay.
Because anytime we exceed the CPI, we're really putting the hurt on your residents around here.
I think that makes perfect
And
sense.
at one point that you weren't here, but I think it is a sensitivity here that's really important, is that residents paid the entire bill of that increase to go to the $15 an hour. Now, you could quibble around the edges of it, how it was computed, but that bill in total was paid for by the residents. There were no savings that paid that bill.
That's correct.
It was computed as the cost of the increase, and the total amount came to the independent living and the third-party customers around here.
Correct.
That seemed a little out of line to me, to be
Okay.
frank with you.
No, and I think you make some very valid points there, and I think particularly with staying in line with the CPI, I see where you're coming from. Yeah.
What is the anticipated, it'll be in the budget, the rate of increase to the employees, how much raise that will be
You mean
experienced?
the raises for team members?
Yeah,
I believe that the discussion that we had, and again, this isn't final yet because the budget is still being finalized, but it's no more than 3%.
no more than 3%?
Correct. Yes. And that's based on merit as well, that's not across the board. So and I think that's an important point, Stan, so I'll kind of touch. So Stan asked about what our proposed increases for wage rates for our team members in 2023 was. So when we did the aggregate wage increases across the board last year, that really kind of drove a lot of this. There were, depending on your department and depending on your longevity in the organization, some of those wage increases were significant. This year, we are going back to what is more of the traditional process of team member wage increases, which is a maximum of 3%, but also based on merit. So as department managers, we will be looking at those individuals and determining 1, 2, 3% increases based on, productivity, merit, so on and so forth. So I think that's gonna mean a significant difference from what we went through as far as the bulk increases last year.
But the chart you showed said average 3% plus a 3% within the mid-year.
Say that
One
again?
of the charts.
Let me go back to the
Yeah,
chart.
one of the charts, and it was,
Let me pull it, and we'll see which one you were talking about.
which would be 4.75, I think you said.
Let's check it out.
While he's looking
Wait a minute,
for,
there it is.
there,
What's the last bullet say?
It says the 3% increase in January.
So again, these are the assumptions as maximums, but this is not, so the 3% is if they have full merit. And that's, not everybody's gonna be getting 3%. And I honestly didn't even know we were gonna do a second one in July. The one we talked about was a 3% 1 year. 2023 budget
I
assumes.
assumed there'd be a 3% average increase in
Yeah.
January and an additional 3% average in July.
And that's what they're assuming in the budget. Yes, that's what it looks like, Steve, you're right.
So if we didn't give the 3% in July average, you'd save money, right?
Yes. And again, as an operational directive out of, my desk or out of our manager's desks, again, the goal is to ensure that that's deserved, correct, yes.
I want to follow up on one of Basil's original comments about the scheduling of the budget and the approval of the budget. Does this change in sequence comply with 650, the requirements of 651? The letter that Taylor, and I'm not pointing to you specifically,
Certainly.
but that you're going to send us on Monday, which will say it's a cap, 7.9%, capped at 7.9%, but it's not been approved yet. So wouldn't 651 require
No,
we have 60 days notice of an approved increase?
So, and that's what I'm saying, so the increase has been approved, it's the finalizing of the budget that they're still working on. Yes, that's the way that, at least that's the, so let's go back to the slide that says the budgeting process.
For those of you who may be FLICRA experts, this might be worth looking into.
Certainly. So the board approved the monthly service fee, so that's where it's been approved and finalized from a monthly service fee standpoint, and that is the letter that I'm delivering to you all on Monday.
So the only thing the board can do between now and December is tinker with their budget.
Correct.
They cannot tinker with the monthly.
That's
Even-
correct.
Even lower it.
That's correct.
And I'm just not sure that complies with 651, that's all I'm asking.
I'm happy to look into that and get an answer for you as well.
The chart seems right to me. Board approves monthly fee increase.
Yes.
And
It's the way it
you
looks.
can say that, but as soon as you start saying capped, you raise the question, has this really been approved? I think it's really been approved, at least according to that.
And again, the cap is what was discussed and introduced at the board of directors meeting, and I can tell you what you can expect to see on that letter is 7.9%. Yes. Yeah, I don't wanna have any confusion with what you can expect on your letter. It will say 7.9%.
I'll change the subject.
Wait a minute, here's one back here.
Yes, sir.
When will you know what the competition is doing in Orlando, what the other CCC, Laura? How are they doing?
So I can tell you that we have some of that data already. Many of them are in the double digits, some of them are not, but I'm happy to pull all of that information and share it with you if you'd like.
I had the same question, that what
Yes.
is the average increase in the industry, and particularly in our own community?
And I can't speak to the average, I just know that when we went through this exercise as an enterprise and with all of the executive directors, we did do some local market research. So specifically, some of our competitors are doing double-digit increases, some of them are not. So there's some higher, some right around where we're at. I can look into a market average if you would like me to try to get that information.
Thank you.
At one of your previous performances, I believe it was Jesse said that you had purchased 3 or 4 new units, and one of those had 100% occupancy.
That's correct.
Now, since that was one of our major problems, and if we could get it up to that, we wouldn't have any problem. What is that can be done to look at that 100% facility and make that happen here?
So that's a very good question, and that's got a whole lot of answers to it. So those communities are structured a little bit differently. They're in very different markets than we are. We have individual plans of action for each of our communities as far as how we're addressing the occupancy challenge. A lot of that is related to supporting the sales effort, as well as different strategic ways that we are finding leads. There's different market research that's going on. So I think really the occupancy focus from an overall life space standpoint, as well as a Village on the Green standpoint, is very much a priority because financially speaking, the obviously 100% occupancy would significantly change what this presentation looks like, and I think everybody knows that. Yeah, I can tell you that from a sales standpoint, though, if you look over the last 10 years or so, or even 5 years, the increases in what we're looking at from a sales standpoint, even though we have some attrition, I think that you can see that the sales effort has ramped up significantly since COVID. COVID really kind of dragged a lot of this stuff down as far as move-ins. Go ahead.
The question regarding the 7.9%, is that going to be across all of the communities? And again, the question comes, if some of the communities, like the ones that are 100%, if being 100% gives them the surplus they would need, would they still be adding 7.9% to those people?
I can't speak to that, but I can certainly find out. I would imagine so, yes. The way that I understand it is that's a flat across the board increase.
Then I guess the question is, what happens to the extra funds if the communities are 100% and they add a 7.9%? That puts their discretionary funds a whole lot larger.
Certainly.
Does LifeSpace Corporate get some of that and share it back to the other communities?
So LifeSpace Corporate, when they take their fee, it's flat. There is no change to what LifeSpace takes in as far as, depending on revenues of other communities. What does happen is, from a capital standpoint, as far as investment into our community, let's just say some of the construction that's going on here, we were not able to internally fund that from Village on the Green dollars that were realized. But because of the success of some of the other communities, that's where that money gets turned over, is into the capital budget, into particular programs, and increasing the actual capital expenditures for the community itself. So like if I was to try to do that project from the Village on the Green budget, I would not be able to do that because it's been several years that we've been operating at a negative in Village on the Green in particular. But if you look at that from an enterprise-wide standpoint, because of the success of those other communities, LifeSpace is able to still fund those projects and still put in the money that's needed to increase services and increase the physical plant here, which is obviously with the hopes of making your experience better, and then obviously with the hopes of really driving further move-ins from an occupancy standpoint as well, because we have more to offer as a community. Anybody else? Thank you very much. I appreciate all of your time and attention, and
No
like I said,
tomatoes.
yes, no tomatoes. It's been very nice.
And you will share these
I will, yeah, so as Basil was just saying, I'm gonna be sharing these slides. I will hand them out to him, and I will also make sure that there are copies available at the front, if you do wanna hang on to some of this information. And as you get to digest this, if you have specifics, please email me, come to my office, give me a call. I'm happy to discuss anything and try to help you as much as I can. Thank you all very much.